Hi, and welcome to Volume 3 of what we've been calling the Bayside Book Chat here at Barrel Island Books and Art in Stone Harbor, New Jersey. Like I said, we're on Volume 3. We've got 2 more posted up on our social media, Facebook and YouTube. I recommend going back and checking out the first 2 so you can see how things are progressing with what we've been talking about. We changed it up a little bit this week, and we have our wall of a big bookshelf back here. In future volumes, we'll talk about what's on it, but we thought we'd mix it up. I noticed in the news today with all the talking heads talking about the pandemic and whatnot, and everybody, due to social distancing, operating out of their home offices, they all seem to put bookshelves behind them. So I guess it makes them look a little smarter, so we thought we'd go with that theme too. We will be moving over to the chair a little later to do our book chat and a couple other things that we have in store for you today. If you could do us the kind favor, if you've been enjoying these chats in social media, like us, love us, and share us to a good friend. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and like many stores down here at the Jersey Shore, it's been a trying time, not like it isn't anywhere else, but down here we're a lot of small mom and pops, and obviously we love your support, and you are doing so by watching what we've been putting out, and hopefully this summer you'll walk through the door on a wind down Wednesday night and share a glass of wine with us and talk about the chats that we had this winter. A little bit more about us. We do mail books, so if during the course of these you see a book that interests you or a category that may interest you and you want to send a message to us, and use Facebook, send a message about what you're interested in, and we'll see what we can fill for you. We also here do have book-related gifts, and we do have some local artists in here, and we're going to talk about more of those in the future. In the meantime, we have a lot in store for you, and we're going to move over to the chair where we're going to get into our book chat. So here I am back in my usual chair over here in the corner, where we start the chatty part of our show here. And as we talked about before, Wednesday night is wine night. We call it the Bayside Book Chat. It happens on Wednesday night, wine night. The bay is behind me, like I mentioned before. My bottle of wine's right next to me. And as usual, we're going to tie it into literature. A really neat quote from last week, which kind of grabbed me and stuck with me a little bit. It doesn't say the word wine in a quote, but it's in there in principle. And it came from Tolkien, and I mentioned it last week. If more of us valued food and cheer, so cheers with my glass of wine. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. And I believe in that wholeheartedly. So I'm going to have a glass and there's to that quote by Tolkien. And I've been mentioning that last week we did Hemingway and Sun Also Rises. And I think they start off in France and get to Spain. I hope I have the order right. So last week we started with a French red. So this week, again, from my sponsor behind me, Fred's Liquor Store is right behind us there. I went over and I picked out a nice white Chardonnay from Spain. And a neat quote that I saw about The Sun Also Rises actually is from a reader. And I'll read this off my phone. And when I say reader, I don't mean me. It was somebody critiquing Hemingway's works. And this is a quote from a reader who says, "If I had to get lost in a fictional world, I would love to go with those Hemingway characters in The Sun Also Rises, when they go on that trip in Spain and they go fishing and they take the wine bottles and they put them in the river." And I know some of my funnest experiences in life are, fishing down at the, whether it be in the ocean or the back bay or in a trout stream in PA, and you got a couple of beers and, you don't have a cooler or your ice runs out and you're able to just stick your beer or your wine right in the water. The other part of the name of the Bayside Book Chat, as mentioned before, comes from the Fireside Chats from FDR. And so here's my weekly FDR quote. "We have always held to the hope, the belief, the conviction that there is a better life, a better world beyond the horizon. So we all know that these are tough times. FDR was trying to get the American people through the ends of the Depression and through World War II. Obviously, very tough times, and I find that very inspirational. That we just got to keep looking forward. The sun keeps coming out, and there's a better future on the horizon. Lincoln said, with public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. This is a quote that's on the top of the Herald newspaper every week. And basically what it says to me is, the people need to be educated. They need to know what's going on. And whatever moves we make as a people, because we are the people, we need to inform the people, we'll do better moving forward with public sentiment, with everybody on the same page. Churchill, because we're going through some tough times, we'll bring up another world leader that had some tough times to get his people through. Churchill, and I've heard this on TV quoted a couple times lately, if you're going through hell, keep going. My thoughts from 10,000 feet. This is just an up-high perspective, looking down and trying to, have a broad vision on things. Obviously right now we're I don't know where we are in this, the beginning of the end of the beginning, but obviously the discussion amongst governors and the President of the United States is that at some point here we need to open up this, an American economy. And with that comes the debate between, money and GDP versus health and, unfortunately, death. And I just think we need to make the most balanced, smart decision. President Trump says that this is the biggest decision he's ever had to make in his life, and I agree that this is going to be a big one, and we want to hope that he makes the best one. And we've got to balance that, decisions of health versus economy. At this point, I still feel that mitigation, what we're doing with social distancing, is still the best thing we've got going until the tests, the medicines, and the vaccines come forth from science. That last recession we had, a catchphrase became that banks were too big to fail, that we bailed out the banks. At this point, I'm worried about small businesses being too small to get access to money. We're going through Congress making decisions on allocation of money from the Fed. And the next round, I think, is going to focus more on small businesses. But my fear is, especially as a small business, and like many in Stone Harbor here, that the big businesses have more access to the banks and to facilitations of getting their money. So I hope we really concentrate on the mom and pop businesses in this country and help them out. To get to that point, isms is a big word or ending of a word as people discuss their thoughts on whether it be communism, socialism, capitalism, conservatism, liberalism. Well, I want the bestism, and I call that realism. We want the best ideas that come from all these isms. It can't just be one thing, just like in medicine. Is it all Western medicine? Is it all Eastern religion? Is it always just surgery? Is it always just this? We want the best idea, and sometimes it can be parts of things, the best parts of what we have to offer. So that's the thoughts from 10,000 feet. We're going to lighten it up a little bit here. We all always seem to bring up nature. So we've got some nature coming your way. We've got some mystery discussions. We've got some book reviews. We've got Louise May Alcott discussion. We've got our PBS list. We've got our usual trivia. And then we've got a toast at the end. And I think we've got some music coming your way. So if you've been with us the last couple volumes, we've been talking a lot about Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And, the title, Silent Spring, I'm sure you can figure it out. But we're going to tell you what the title means, which is the title, Silent Spring, was inspired by a line from the John Keats poem, La Belle Dame sans Merci. and it evokes a ruined environment in which, quote, the sedge is withered from the lake and no birds sing. So the point of the title was, as she studied DDT and the effects of it, naturally a lot of the birds and tree frogs that would have been singing in the springtime were silenced. And of late, we've had something that has been happening along those lines, which is the overspraying of a chemical put out by Monsanto that is very similar or used in the chemical used in your front yard called Roundup, and it's having a great effect on the bees. And the danger there is to our food crops, because the bees are the great pollinators. And if we don't have the bees, we don't have the buds and the flowers that eventually become our fruits and vegetables. Another way to think about this is how that occurred. And it's the overspraying of large farms. Small farms, and especially more diverse and organic farms, don't have to field spray with the large booms on the back of tractors like these big farms are doing. And when these big farms plant large single fields of things, there's not much diversity, but they're only really planting one major crop, whether that be corn or wheat, rather than having a small farm with a lot more diversity in hedgerows. So there's nothing to break up those large fields. One thing that my mother worked on for a lot of years when she was a steward of one of Pennsylvania's most famous trout streams, Penn's Creek, in central PA, was trying to encourage the farmers not to till right to the very edge of their farm fields down by the streams. Leave a little bit of a buffer zone, some more hedgerows, something to absorb the runoff of the the mud and clay from farming. But like I said, another thing that's happening is this overspraying. So it's something to keep our minds on, and you'll see people trying to raise funds and knowledge on bees. So to my cousin Chris out there, keep your honey flowing. I know he's doing his part. There's a lot of people in this country who have taken up beekeeping as a way to help combat what is happening with the chemical spraying. Moving on to books. A quick show of what we got along those lines. We've shown you these before. We've got the bird guides, because it's the birds and the bees in the springtime. We just talked about the bees, so we talked about our field guides to the birds. And what do bees do? They help pollinate flowers, and we have a lot of field guides and books on butterflies and bees. And then we mentioned that my mother was a steward of a trout stream in PA. Who nothing better than, I know as a young boy, one of my favorite things to do was stand in a trout stream and try to outsmart the trout, whether it be with a fly or whatever your favorite bait was. But we've got a lot of books on fishing, both saltwater and fresh. And next we're going to move on to mysteries. So we're going to move ourselves over to our mystery wall. So we're over here in our mystery wall. We've got a whole row of mysteries here in paperbacks that you can take to the beach. We've talked about some of these before. We've got the classics like Agatha Christie. We talked about how we've got a lot of Carl Hyacin and Randy Wayne White, who we have a lot of snowbirds, people who live here in the summer, but then in the winter to get down to Florida. Those authors wrote a lot about Florida beaches, and the Keys, Sanibel Island. So we do real well with those to a lot of locals. And then we talked about before, Lee Child, Baldacci, Coben, Vince Flynn, Patterson. So we've got a lot of the very popular current male authors. And then we talked about how we've got a lot of Scandinavian authors. People like Stieg Larsson, Joe Nesbo, Henning Mankell, Håkan Nesser, Peter Hoeg. They write more small town thoughtful mysteries than the your typical FBI shoot 'em ups. But lately we've got my mother chiming in with some suggestions on some books that she likes to read that are travel destination mysteries, and she's got a couple favorite authors, and she made some notes from things that she's read. And one of the authors is Louise Penny. Right here we've got a couple of hers, and my mother made some notes that says Penny's detective mysteries are set in Quebec City, Canada, and the quaint small village of Three Pines. The Chief Inspector Gamache, head of the Sûreté, solves his cases through intuition, interviews, and the help of his friends. A modern Agatha Christie flavored with a French Canadian sensibility. You will learn to know and enjoy the villages and their quirks. Each book is written to be self-standing, so you don't have to, read them in order. Another author that she mentioned is, don't mind my head ducking there, got to reach for the books, is Donna Leone. And about her is said, learn about the city of Venice, its food, culture, and crime by reading Donna Leone's popular mysteries. Commissario Guido Bernetti solves a variety of suspicious deaths and murders while hopping on, boy, that's a tricky word, traghettis. I guess they're those little boats that go through canals. Racing across Venetian squares or often stopping for espresso and drinking grappa, whatever that is. The Italian workday is much different than American, with late starts, long lunches, and working in the evenings. Bernetti solves his cases through police work and crime scene investigation. He gets input and inspiration from his professor wife in reading the classics. These books also do not have to be read in order, but have the same characters throughout. All right, last week we held up a copy of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and we promised you that in a future volume we would go a little bit more in depth. So I'd like to introduce my producer, photographer, stepping into the limelight tonight. She's done a little expose on Louisa May Alcott. I'm going to step out of the way. I'm going to take my wine with me because she's not quite of age. And there you go.
Okay, so right now I'm reading Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, which is definitely her most popular book and her most famous book. And I also watched the newest adaptation of Little Women, which was Greta Gerwig's 2019 movie. So, Louisa May Alcott. Louisa May Alcott was born on November 29th, 1832 in Germantown, Pennsylvania. A tomboyish child, the family moved to Boston in 1834, where Alcott's father established a school and joined the Transcendental Club with Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. Louisa's early education included lessons from the naturalist Henry David Thoreau, who inspired her to write Thoreau's Flute, and young Alcott also received instruction from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a family friend. The family then moved to Concord, Massachusetts in 1840. Alcott's family lived in poverty, so Louisa worked many jobs, unable to go to public school, and she wrote her first book, Flower Fables, in 1849 for Ralph Waldo Emerson's daughter, Ellen. The Alcotts also served as station masters on the Underground Railroad in 1847 when they housed a fugitive slave for 1 week and had discussions with Frederick Douglass. Alcott became the first woman to register to vote in Concord in a school board election. In the 1850s, Louisa and her family had many ups and downs, and Alcott was a Civil War nurse, and when she returned, she began writing passionate, fiery novels under the name A.M. Barnard, becoming very successful with both parts of the novel Little Women, or Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, a semi-autobiographical account of her childhood with her sisters in Concord, inspired also by the death of her younger sister Elizabeth. The parts were published in 1868 and 1869. Alcott wrote Little Men in 1871 and then Jo's Boys in 1886. The heroine of the March family saga, Jo, is based on Louisa herself, with the sisters based on the real-life Alcott sisters. Alcott never married, but took in her past sister May's daughter and helped form the Women's Educational and Industrial Union in Boston in 1877. Alcott began to grow ill and died of a stroke at age 55 on March 6, 1888, 2 days after her beloved father's death. I love Little Women because I feel like it is a book for every generation, and I feel like it can be read over and over again to instill and make people believe in the power of women and the power of sisterhood and friendship. And I always relate to the main character Jo, as she is revolutionary, she's very independent, and she, even though the ways of the world in the 1860s when Little Women was written kind of went against everything that Jo and Louisa May Alcott herself believed, they did not let the woes of the world rest on their shoulders, and it was their determined goal that they were going to be what Amy March called reformers, people who were going to make the world the way they want it to be and change it for the better.
Last episodes we've talked about the PBS The Great American Read, and last week we covered 1 through 10. So now we're moving on to 11 through 20. So here we go. Number 11, Anne of the Green Gables by Lucy Montgomery. And a classic that people talk about all the time, about the struggles in the early 1900s in the American West, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. And that is actually a first-year printing, but not the first. But that is what the book looked like. Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, which Parker is reading at home. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, one of Hemingway's buddies. Actually, Hemingway used to send his notations or manuscripts to Fitzgerald and say to him, simplify this for me. While many other authors were looking for fluff and add-ons, Hemingway was always looking for simplicity. The Help by Catherine Stockett. Adventures of Tom Sawyer. We all know Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Mark Twain. Many people considered him to be the great American humorist. 1984, George Orwell. I mentioned that we sold our copy, so I don't have it. But that was number 18. 19, I do have Agatha Christie, And Then There Were None. Of course, this is just a paperback copy. And I do not have number 20, which is Atlas Shrugged, but I do have other books by Ayn Rand, Fountainhead. All right, we're getting to the end here. We're moving right along, and then just a couple of follow-ups before we get on to our trivia. My cousin Kim chimed in from Percy, Pennsylvania, to mention that as I was talking about fiction pandemic books, that I missed one, which we have. Geraldine Brooks, which is a very popular author in this store, which is called The Year of Wonders, which is a fiction book about pandemics. And we're going to move on to our trivia. So last week I asked, what was the New Jersey state flower? That is the violet. I mentioned that a very pretty bird was the state bird of New Jersey, and that is the American goldfinch. We talked about Rachel Carson, and the name of that book was Silent Spring, which we talked about tonight. I wore my t-shirt about Thor Heyerdahl's raft adventure across the Pacific. That was Kon-Tiki. Michael Crichton, which I actually found the book over there, which was The Andromeda Strain. For you locals, a bar that was here before I even got here. I didn't get here until the 80s, but a bar that was here that had the long shuffleboard game was called Hans. The bird, which people unfortunately stole feathers from to make great Easter bonnets, was the egret. And around here we've got two popular ones. The taller one is called the common egret. The smaller one is called the snowy egret. What year do we have a hurricane that wiped out many of the boardwalks of our Jersey Shore towns? That was 1938. Another storm was known as the spring storm, the Easter storm, the March storm of 1962. The month was March, but obviously it was not a hurricane. It was a nor'easter, which we are very familiar with around here. So now we're going to move on to our questions for this coming week, or this week that we're in, which is what book did George Orwell parody the effects of communism? 2, what is the nearest lighthouse to Stone Harbor? 3, what type of wine does Hannibal Lecter refer to in The Silence of the Lambs? That was in volume 1 for us on the video chart here. What author was one of my favorites as a young man that wrote the book The Sea Wolf? What bird is pictured in the corporate logo for Stone Harbor? And for a bonus point, there's a boat next to it. What is the name of the style of sailboat that is in the corporate logo? Question number 6. What author of thrillers has a character named Jack Ryan? And 7, I think there was 4 different actors that have played his part. What is the last actor, I think it was 2018, that played Jack Ryan in the movies? What is the name, when I say that, I always say, what? It's almost like, what is your favorite color in Monty Python? But we're doing number 8. What is the name of the inlet between Avalon and Sea Isle? What body of water separates Avalon and Sea Isle? And here's one that might show up in common trivia. What is the most printed book in the world, history-wise? What book has been printed more than any book ever? That might be the easy part. The next part is, what was the name of the press, which is named after the gentleman who created the press that made not only the printing of the book popular, but led to mass production of books going forward. So thank you for playing with the trivia. We're moving on to our closing, where at the end we have a very uplifting tune coming from my daughter Parker on the ukulele. At the end, we always like to toast. And last week we mentioned my niece Emma. This week we're going to do a toast to Marnie's side of the family, Patrick Daly, who's a officer in Egg Harbor Township. So thank you to all the people in the front lines. And we just hope you keep watching. Like us and love us on Facebook and social media. Interact and send us your trivia answers through Facebook. And until next week, keep low, aim high, be smart, be safe. And in honor of the Spanish wine I was drinking tonight, Vaya con Dios, in terms of the music, always look on the bright side of life.
Some things in life are bad. They can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. And always look on the bright